All right, let's go on to the last agenda item about the recall vote. So Tanis, as we mentioned, who's the chair of the Election Resolutions Committee, is going to introduce that subject. So Emmanuel will address the meeting. You'll have an opportunity for questions, comments, and then we'll give an opportunity for Emmanuel to answer, and then we should be done for the evening. All right, over to you, Tanis.
Thank you very much, Kathleen, and thank you everybody who's still in the room and those watching online. So first of all, I want to clarify, while your agenda says this is a debate, it is not a debate. This is not a debate on the recall vote. This is an opportunity for you to hear from the ERC on the plans for the vote, get a little contextual information, in particular in relation to, I'm just going to take this off since it's echoing. Get some contextual information, in particular in relation to the changes and new information that's come forward in the last several days in relation to the votes, and then to hear from Emmanuel and speak. So I just want to clarify that again. I'm here to talk on behalf of the ERC and about the vote. Anything that happens after I leave this stage is not about the ERC. It was a decision of the NEC in terms of how things are set up. So the NEC has complete control over those elements. So the ERC in this process is responsible for the vote itself. Unlike an election for, say, the EC director by elections, where the ERC has wide-ranging powers specifically set out in the Constitution and bylaws, for a recall vote, we've been advised that we have a much more limited mandate, and that mandate is limited to specific issues, choosing the voting mechanism, paper or electronic. Those are the two options that our Constitution allows. Verifying if they're in the case of an electronic vote, verifying the service provider, which is recommended to us by national office staff, and again, that's set out in the bylaws. We set the opening and closing of the votes. That's not set by the Constitution, as it is for, again, other types of votes that the ERC has authority over, such as, again, resolutions and elections. We set the ballot question. We are responsible for verifying and reporting the results of the vote to members, and to ensuring that the entire voting process is conducted in a fair, transparent manner that has integrity, so that we can, again, tell you that this vote was conducted appropriately. Every other element related to the recall vote and any discussions around issues that may impact how members consider this issue falls under the NEC. So this recall vote is very unique. Again, it falls under Article 20 of the Constitution. This is the first time in my experience with the ERC that we've had a recall vote or any vote of this type. And again, as Alex had noted, there was a recommendation by both the Complaints Committee and by the NEC to encourage that the ERC hire a third-party oversight body. And we have accepted that recommendation. We hired PricewaterhouseCoopers to come in and provide oversight services for the vote itself, again, looking at our processes, our databases, the service provider, looking at any issues in terms of irregularities, and reporting back on those process and integrity issues. We're also, I think, getting a really great support out of them in that they're providing us with policy recommendations as well. So they have technical experts, they have vote oversight excellence, and they also have policy expert who is working on this project. And their objective is to provide us with some additional value in terms of giving us recommendations and to help us strengthen our policies and improve future elections and formalize some practices that are currently not well written down. Again, the Constitution and bylaws are highly specific on certain elements and completely vague or silent on a number of other elements. So again, I think we've all acknowledged, and many people have acknowledged tonight, that there needs to be a more robust framework for certain elements of CAPE's business. So again, PwC's work will help us with that, and I'm very grateful that they are working with us. I want to speak to you about the significant changes and significant information that very recently came to the attention of the NEC and the ERC, which is leading to the delayed votes on all of the items that have been discussed tonight. And I'm just going to lay a bit of a timeline as well. So Thursday, you may recall it as the day before the long weekend for us. Cape National was informed by Insight, the database provider that we use, who also is the service provider for the vote, that they will not be able to run a vote starting on November 17th, as they had decided to do internal system upgrades to enhance the security of their voting processes. That was news to everybody. Again, the voting schedule the elections calendar had been established in September. Our understanding is that was appropriately communicated with our service provider. And so again, this was a very shocking piece of information that we got Thursday at 11 a.m. That there would be no vote taking place on the 17th. On Friday, there was also an email that came to myself, the ERC representative who works with PwC, and the CAPE staff representative who works with PwC, noting that they had talked to Insight and talked to CAPE National and identified a number of concerns around the voter database, including controls on the voter database. They had recommendations on how to resolve those issues, but they did not feel that, they said, we're happy to go ahead and actually observe your vote when it takes place. But if you don't solve these problems, there's going to be a giant red flag asterisk on the front of the report saying, we certified these elements, we can't certify these elements. So again, they provided recommendations in terms of how to deal with those. So again, we had actually, Friday we were informed that this was a problem. The conversations with PwC didn't happen until Monday. And again, it was a lot of information to understand. Both the ERC and the NEC met on Tuesday. The ERC met at noon, and the NEC met for what seemed like hours. Well, I guess it was hours. You guys were there for 4.5 hours, I believe, last night. So again, thank you to the NEC for all of your work. And at that time, the ERC and the NEC both unanimously passed motions agreeing to, at a high level, 2 things. Number one is that all votes be delayed until the issues affecting the integrity of the vote have been addressed. And the other item is that to hold a 2-part AGM to ensure that we are not violating the requirements of our bylaws in terms of, again, the bylaws state that certain types of votes have to close 10 days after the end of an AGM. So again, we do not want to violate the bylaws. We're doing our best to do that. So that, again, has led to this particular situation. The speed at which events have evolved, and again, the fact that we still do not have all of the information we feel is necessary for us to make decisions moving forward, means that there's a lot of answers we can't give you that you deserve to have a response to. So I do apologize for that. However, I think you do have a very clear commitment from both the NEC and the ERC that we want to hold these votes in a timely manner. And we want to do that only once the integrity of the vote can be assured. So again, we're looking at a number of options, including the recommendations of PwC, to ensure that we can figure out what it's going to take and on what timeline to make sure that happens. Information will be released to you in the coming days. And again, I ask for your patience and your understanding about this incredibly unusual, exceptional circumstance. So again, we are, as the ERC is working with PwC, we're working with CAPE National staff. They are working with Insight. We are observing the responses of the NEC where appropriate in terms of, again, they have leadership in certain areas. We are not in control of the database, for example. So we are working collaboratively to ensure that this vote happens in a timely manner. And I would say that there's been some questions that have been raised. I'm going to try and address the 2 that I remember that I wrote down while I was on the floor. One of them is a question raised by Greg in regards to Insight and ensuring that all members receive ballots and a guarantee that all members will have access to a vote. Again, Greg, you've raised these issues before with concerns around StatsCan members, and the ERC has asked for additional information on those issues from staff in the past. We will continue to investigate that issue. We'll continue to look into that issue, and again, I think there may be additional questions asked, but my understanding is, and again, I would be pleased if the entire PwC report was released so that people can read it for themselves. I do not recall the concerns that they raised being about that issue. Again, I think it was largely about controls on the database itself that impact the creation of a voters list, but again, I may not have absorbed every element of that PwC report. Again, we continue to think that issue is important. In the past, we have, based on discussions with staff and staff discussions with Insight, felt that there were appropriate mechanisms in place to deal with in cases where members did not receive a ballot in that first try. But again, we continue to think that issue is important. And thank you for raising it, and thank you for, again, representing the concerns of your members here. In terms of how did we just find out there were problems with the service provider now, again, I would think that the PwC report would clarify that my understanding is this isn't about the service provider itself in terms of the electronic vote services. Insight has, again, proactively decided to upgrade their security requirements and how they proceed in certain elements. I don't think that this is in relation to the same issues that were raised previously in the investigation and the allegations raised for the investigation. But again, I think that this is something that looking at the PwC report would provide more information on. These are new issues that are not necessarily related to insight. Again, if you have a voter database or a voter list that is inaccurate, or are there other issues related to that, or controls related to who has access to that voter database, it doesn't matter who's sending out the ballot. It doesn't matter who's counting the ballot if the issue is whether everybody is getting a ballot as they should. So those are the two questions I remember. I'm sure there are questions I don't remember. I'm not sure if I am taking questions at this point or if I'm closing and deferring to Emmanuel and the rest of the portion of this session. So I'm going to look at a few people. Hope nobody comes up is actually what I'm hoping. Okay. Oh, there we go. The other thing I'm just going to, before our questioners start to speak, the other thing I would say is there's been a call for suggestions on what we could do at the next AGM. Committee reports might be a good idea. If you want to hear more from the ERC, we would be happy to speak to you. And again, if you want to hear from other committees, I'm sure they want to speak to you as well.
Okay, so let's try to be brief so that we can get to the last agenda item.
Sure, I'll be very brief. Miranda, Health Canada. Tanis, I just wondered if you'd received any, or if you'd sought any legal advice regarding your self-declared conflict of interest on the ERC.
Thanks, Miranda. As you've been informed, I have never declared a conflict of interest. You've received that information on multiple occasions. What I have declared is that there's potential for a perceived conflict of interest. Thank you. I appreciate your opinion. Again, so there's potential for a perceived conflict of interest in relation to my past personal relationship with a current candidate, and I have sought legal advice personally in relation to that. I have also taken action in terms of, number one, declaring my past personal relationship with this candidate to the ERC, declaring that relationship to candidates as well. And also recusing myself from any votes that are specifically related to that candidate. And again, the ERC has considered that issue as well and has determined that they feel that the actions that I've taken are appropriate, and they feel that that resolves any issues. And I respect the opinion of the ERC.
Okay, sir, did you have a question?
Oui, bonsoir, Eric Robert, chez ACEP Canada.
Sorry. I want you to know what the choices will be on the ballot. What will the questions be? What will the choices be?
The ERC had determined a ballot question at the meeting last night of the NEC. The NEC had asked for that ballot question to be shared with them. And when it was, they had recommended, again, unanimously, that the ERC reconsider that ballot question on the basis of some concerns that they raised. So we are going to go take that issue back to the ERC. My understanding is that we need to finalize the ballot question this Friday in order to meet potential deadlines for submission to the service provider. So at this point, I am not able to tell you what the ballot question would be, but it is something that the ERC is strongly considering. And again, the NEC has strongly encouraged simplicity.
OK, juste pour...
Very quickly, very quickly. Will there be a choice? Will I be able to abstain from voting? Will that be a choice on the ballot?
Abstain from voting. I don't think there will be an option of spoiling your ballot, eating your ballot, any of the preferred mechanisms for voting without voting. I think, again, we're going to have a yes, no, or very similar positive, negative type of a question with two options, and members will hopefully choose to vote in the recall. And if they do not, then, again, their only option would be not to submit a ballot.
Okay, so thank you. Last question before we get to the next item. Or to Emmanuel.
Very quick question.
Yeah, okay.
Nicholas Stewart at Global Affairs Canada, and my question is: you mentioned the PwC report. Who has the ability to release that, and when can we expect it released?
I would not be, I'm sorry that constantly it feels like everybody's saying, not me. I do not know the answer to that question. I do not know if it's work product that is required to be, provided by the contractor only, et cetera. So I'm going to defer to the NEC or to CAPE staff on that. Probably the NEC is my guess.
Okay. Tanis, I think we're going to have to move on.
Yes,
so thank you
please.
very much.